Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Improv Network podcast. This is a show where we talk about improv, having conversations aimed at...
We talk about everything.
I forgot our new slogan. Aimed at building stronger connections throughout the improv community. That's it.
James using the classic device of, if you don't have anything to say, just say, hey, until he comes
just say, and start forming vowels, and eventually you'll say something.
Builds anticipation till you actually form the word, and it's always satisfying.
And yes, if you have nothing, it just sounds cool, so you still fill the space.
Hey! See? It works.
I'm James Quesada.
And I'm Bob Wick.
We're your education team for the Improv Network. You can check out the improvnetwork.org for all sorts of wonderful resources, including blogs and interviews and the ability to put up your own improviser profile, team profile, theater festival profiles. And you can also find the Improv FAQ tab, which has these conversations as well as some lecture videos and video resources for you on educational improv. Our guest today is the co-CEO of the Improv Network, Melanie Leon. Thanks for joining us, Mel.
I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, so I am the CEO of the Improv Network, which means I get to work with these lovely two humans, which is amazing. And I've really been enjoying watching this show and the podcast and hearing everything you have to offer. So it's a true honor to be able to be a guest myself today.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking about improv simulations, like training exercises and occupational type role play, which I'm very interested to talk about because you brought it up as a potential topic, and we'll start by hearing about what your experience is with it. I have a little bit of it myself, and I think it's a very interesting, not something that you think about a lot when you think about like, well, you know, man, I'm doing a bunch of improv, and I wonder if there's a way that I can like apply it in the real world or to other like occupational things adjacent to improv. So I think it's a good, really interesting topic that I hope people opens up a new world of ideas to people.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because I've never took a step into this world, so I'm really excited to hear about this.
Yeah, and so what is your experience with this type of improv, Mel?
Yeah, so I actually have quite a bit of it. My journey, I guess, with this began in college. So I had this weird hybrid line of study, which was like half, let's call it 80% biology science degree. And then I was also doing improv, and I loved them both. And I was kind of trying to sit there and decide, how do you incorporate both into, you know, the required thesis that I needed to do? And I ended up partnering with a local hospital and doing kind of this simulated role play with improvisers that were part of the group that I was in to teach, in that time, their occupational therapists basically how to communicate better with their patients to get a better outcome. And basically we would give these improvisers a situation, a mindset, and then they would improvise with the medical professional. And it would give the medical professional these reps to practice their communication skills before they have them on the floor. And so I got to kind of do this whole series with the hospital and run through this program and develop it. And that's kind of where my fascination and love with all of this started. And then for the last 6 years, I actually got hired by that hospital to do simulations for different people that worked in the hospital. And then as of recent, I've also started doing simulations for the military. So all of them kind of, and they also exist, you will find them, you know, groups will be doing them for businesses and corporations, groups will be doing them, you know, in education. And, you know, the general concept always is, how do we teach these professionals to communicate? How do we put them in these situations before they are in them in the real world and before their actions impact a real human life? So, you know, especially kind of in the medical realm or the military realm, facing these often really intense, really often life or death situations, kind of hectic, emotionally heightened situations before there's a real human there whose life literally depends on how they handle it. If we can give them that experience, if we can give them that practice, you kind of get a little muscle memory. You get used to saying the things you have to say. You get used to being comfortable having to make the decisions you have to make. And that's where the improvisers come in. You know, they get some bullet points, they get a scenario. Every program is different how they handle that. But then you are in that room playing that, patient, that other person in the corporation, the customer in customer service, another person in your unit in the military. And you are playing it and you are improvising with that person. You are responding in the moment from your character to really get them ready for the real world. And, studies have shown time and time and time again that this not only prepares them better, but they have a higher success rate when they face them in the real world. So I started in the medical world. That's what my thesis is on. So it's probably where I have the most knowledge, but it works in a similar manner everywhere. So it's really fascinating. And a lot of improvisers across the country are involved because they're the best to do this. They're the people who truly can be like, your character has this thought about the world, and then get into that mindset and improvise with them.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I am really curious about is that, like, the types of roles that you would do. I mean, hospital and military seem like pretty involved occupations to be like just jumping in and role playing to, because unlike stage improv, you can't just like make shit up. So like what kind of like prep do they give you, or like when were you initially for the hospital stuff, you said you were like designing these exercises, right? So like how when you have someone who's role playing the scenario for the person who's doing the training, how are you figuring out like, okay, you need this much information, but also understandably you can't just like get an overnight crash course in all the nuances and whatnot. Like how do you kind of package it for training?
Yeah. So again, I think every organization kind of has a level of criteria that they deem necessary. But in a lot of my work, and especially in the program that I was developing, there is a ton of research, and not necessarily on the part of just the improviser, but on the person who is creating the point of that exercise. So in my thesis, one of the ones we would be focusing on is deciding on how to handle someone who is showing signs of potentially being suicidal. So how, as that occupational therapist, the person is there for other reasons, but you're starting to get kind of these hints and these clues that they might be suicidal. So how do you prepare for that? You have to really do the research of, what do people come into these offices visits for? Mm-hmm. What are the types of kind of signs, either nonverbal or verbal, from themselves or from their family, that might be clues for you to realize that's happening? And then what are the rules and regulations of the organization? If they know it's happening, they have to follow. Are they allowed to, and their organization, to ask, to comment, to handle it? Do they have to contact a higher up? So you kind of have to really understand those steps so that you can provide them to the performer. And then in a situation like that, we often will pair with a subject matter expert. So someone who is in the hospital, someone who is in the military, someone who is in that exact corporate office, to really understand truly the environment and what the rules and regulations are, which then allows us to go back and basically rehearse with the improviser. Oh, being cool. Like, let's see your physical stance head to toe if we're trying to portray this. And you run through it. There were times that, in my hospital work since then, that I've had to play younger individuals, think like 12, 13, with autism, which clearly is not something that I know the mannerisms nor the language for. So they would bring in a subject matter expert, someone who researches that, and we would sit in a room together and we would watch videos and we would walk through, the actual papers kind of written for it. We would be given the terminology. We would watch a video for each term, and then we would run it. People who have seen this day in and day out, and they would be like, oh, tweak this a little bit. We need your hands to be doing this instead. Or, oh, that's not a word we would necessarily hear. Mm-hmm. And you run through it so that you really understand kind of the behaviors and, the mechanisms of your body that you may not know. So there is a much larger research prep than otherwise. It's not just like, go and run it and then we'll see. Right, it's definitely like research, then run, then research, then run, then do the simulation.
Yeah, I did like a interview exercise thing with a police station that was hiring a new sheriff, and they had all these candidates, and so they wanted them to go through scenarios with like civilians and then like internal stuff and whatnot. But I think I got like an email with like a breakdown of like, you know, a paragraph of what each of the types of personas they were looking for and which ones I would likely be playing. But then I got there, and then I got to ask maybe a couple questions, and like it went well, and they were happy with what we did and everything. But I just like I was like, wow, I don't know. One of the characters that I was playing was like a somebody who is pushing back. Like the scenario is, okay, this officer is becomes the new sheriff, and then they're trying to discipline one of the officers on their team, but that officer is pushing back because like they have actually been there longer than the new sheriff or whatever. And I'm like 25 and doing this, and I'm like, I don't really know what like what like a 45-year-old officer.
I've never had seniority before. What does that feel like?
Yeah. So, you know, again, I think it worked for what they were doing, and it was a little bit more just like basically seeing how they deal with stress in the moment, and not so much about like the practical, like the effectiveness of what they do as a result. But yeah, so that's been my experience. What you're describing sounds like a really great way to just like actually be learned and trained on a very pretty detailed understanding of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then does it still, I'm sure that obviously that's way more effective, and you can do a lot more with it. Like it's more flexible, but like, are there still times in your experience doing it where you're like, shoot, I don't know, like I'm like in a corner of, I'm in this moment, I don't know the reality of how to respond to this, or like it feels inauthentic. Like what happens when you run into those kind of situations?
Yeah, I'm sure that happens to anyone at any time, and that's part of the beauty of having improvisers do it, because when we hit that moment, we're just like, all right, we're gonna keep going. You know, we don't hit like the moment of just like, oh no, I'm frozen. It's just like, well,
I hope you
tell me
literally
after
do
if
that.
I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, what's in
Sweep
the
the
car?
stage.
Very possible. I have definitely, I mean, and I'm sure we all have in, you know, situations they'll be like, have you taken this medication and was its impact this? And I'm just like, I don't know. You know, because patients do that too, which is the beauty of the medical world. It's just like, but yes, you do run into those moments. And I think it depends on kind of the detail of the scenario. So you will get scenarios that are like, you are this age, this is your name, and you fell off a ladder and your arm hurts. And like, that's all you get. Okay. And you go in and you're like, yeah, of course. This is how many kids I have and I'm married, and you're just making it up completely. And in those moments, it's definitely easier because you kind of have just an open world in front of you to create, where as long as you're consistent, you don't change the symptoms, you have the world open to you. And then you do get ones that are much more detailed, much more specific. But I will say it's pretty rare that you run into those moments where you're like, I honestly don't know what to do. You feel prepared. You really have what to fall back on. You really kind of understand where, if you're unsure, what is that behavior to kind of sink into. Weirdly enough, probably like kind of those autism cases are the ones that are kind of specific in how they really want that end objective to be hit. So you don't really want to kind of waver off of kind of that center line they provide to you too much. But they do a really great job at kind of providing, you know, if they're pushing you out of your comfort zone, where you kind of fall back into as far as the scenario description. So there's all levels of details and all levels, which kind of keep the variety up if you might ever feel stuck. But it's not often, because you are improvisers and you do kind of get to create the character, or enough of the character is provided for you to feel comfortable in. I mean, there are definite ones where I've wondered if I've gone too far, if that makes sense. You know, we might be playing a psych case, where they get someone in who they consider kind of like a code red, and you are having a mental break, and you are one of those patients that they are trying to decide, could you hurt them if they get too close? Could you potentially run through that glass pane window right there? And you really kind of get to do these incredibly heightened, aggressive characters. And there are definite moments where you're like screaming and thrashing and throwing things and making very aggressive threats that you're like, is this too much? Whatever I just said, was that too violent? I don't know if I've gone too, but you're still going. And, usually it's not too far. Usually they're like, yep, that's what we face on a day to day. And you're like, wow, I am so sorry for you. This is terrifying, that you have to go through this. But those moments happen sometimes. You're like, I don't know if I should have just said that, but I'm going to keep going and hope.
I love that you're tracing the thought as it passes through the front of your brain.
Yeah. I distinctly remember in one of those scenes, the director of it was kind of like, do whatever you want. These people never know what's coming into them. And just like, I don't know, the hand sanitizer, just like emptying it all into my hand and just like flinging it into everybody's face. And at one point I was like, maybe this is too much. Like I'm actively
they'll give you notes after. That's what notes are for, right?
That's what notes are for.
That's what notes are for. You mentioned earlier talking about the nonverbal communication, and that reminded me of a story you were telling me and James, I think a couple weeks ago, about you having some serious makeup on and having an issue getting it off before. Can you just remind me? I'm foggy on the details. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, well, part of it is, sometimes there's injuries or surgeries, so they will do something called moulage, which is basically theatrical makeup, or temporary tattoos. So you might get a temporary tattoo of like an infected surgical site, so it's like all red and gross looking with sutures in it. Or you might get a black eye, or you might get something on your hand that it looks broken. And so it's meant to stay on. So I've had many times where I've gone from this job to a, actual improv on a stage at a theater position. And you're like in the green room trying to like rub it off, with an alcohol wipe or something. And you don't always get it off in time. So sometimes you do get to walk around just a little bruised looking, or like a little cut or something.
That's right. I do remember you telling that story, because that was also in the same conversation where we were talking about you having to pretend to poke people with needles, right?
So I think that was just a growing moment bit. That's not reality.
Okay.
I think that was just a bit that built out of whatever we were talking about.
Well, let's try to recreate it now.
Yeah.
It'll make just as much sense. All the bits will hit just as hard.
Oh, that thing when you recreate a bit, it's always as good as the first time you did a bit. I love it.
Let's see. Yeah, what were we talking about?
Yeah, especially because none of us really remember it. Yeah, let's dive in. It's great.
Let's piece it together. No, but I'm impressed by how much detail you put into the work, just so people can get that muscle memory, because the jobs you're talking about are ones where they have to assess a situation that they may have never been in, but have to know the answer to. And that putting that puzzle together without seeing the top of the box can be impossible sometimes.
And I think that's exactly it, is these people are often placed, again, specifically kind of in the medical and military world, in truly impossible situations. There's no right answer often. Yeah. You've got the medical people who not only have to figure out what's wrong with the individual, but also keep them safe, keep the individual safe, and continue with, empathetic, emotionally intelligent communication. That's a lot to balance for anyone. And so these run-throughs give them kind of resilience. They come into the situation and, oftentimes their eyes get, 6 times bigger, and they are truly knocked completely off center. I mean, you can see it happen. But then every time they do a situation, they get slightly knocked off less. Or they just come back to center more. They may get giantly knocked off center, but they can figure out how to re-bring it together and come back. So it doesn't take them a half an hour. It takes them 2 minutes. And that's kind of the thing, is how do we train them to bring themselves back to center faster every time? And it's practice. And, we would much rather have them fail in a scenario with an improviser and get those notes than fail with a patient who now goes home and doesn't want to take their medication because they don't trust what was said. Right. Actively got hurt because they were not giving the cues or getting the cues in the right way and they left and actively got hurt.
Yep.
You know, it's in an abusive situation that you missed because there's too much going on. So we would much rather them fail with us and get that experience than fail with a real human. And the improvisers are just, they're perfect for that because as a whole, we are a group of people who are yes and. Our belief system is support and enhance, and that's what we're there to do, is support and enhance these individuals kind of on their journey to help other people, which is really great. And there are simulations that are specifically like, find this heart condition. That is your one job, is to say it. But most of them truly are, how did you talk to that individual? How did you bring them to calmness? How did you speak empathetically so that they trust you? So that from now on, that trust is there and they're going to listen to you. So it's more about communication, which is why improvisers are so great, because the entire time is just a conversation and teaching them to communicate.
Yeah. And that's what you said, like, I'm curious if there are things as the role-playing improviser, you're also looking for like certain actions or kind of keywords for the person training to use. If you're like, we want you to get really worked up, but the trainee's goal is going to be to calm you back down. That's the type of scenario where I'm like, one, I don't know what would calm me down if I were in that real like manic state or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just imagine being on the other side of that and being like, if I'm trying to make a real human connection with somebody who's actually, flipping out, like I might try things that are not, like, I guess not unconventional, but like there's a certain like intangible or like, I don't know, like the
think with your heart
connection
rather than like what you read in a book.
Yeah, we're like if you can connect in the right way, like in the eyes, then there's something intangible about that. And I just like I'm wondering how you kind of quantify some of those types of things, or separate them from the training, so that you know, as the improviser, like, okay, they did this and that is supposed to have calmed me down.
Yeah, so the great part about that is there's nothing that's going to calm everybody down.
Right.
It's just not a thing. They can train you to stand with an open posture so you don't look like, you're angry at them, but everybody's different and it's not going to be the same. So a lot of that gets left to the improviser. Do you feel connected in this moment? Do you trust this person? Do you want to hear more of what they have to say? Whether you're kind of in a military simulation and maybe, they're giving you a death notification of your partner, or, in the hospital situation, maybe they've just come to you and told you that your child has died. And, you're in the room, like watching it happen, but they turn around and tell you, those are two very kind of heightened emotional moments that the improvisers are often really out of 10, crying, upset, mad, everything you can think of. And there's no set thing. Mm-hmm. And some people are going to come in and do a great job at being there for you. And some people are going to come in and do a horrible job and just try to get out. Right. Mm-hmm. And it is really up to that person to feel how they feel. And
so
that's
let me ask,
great.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's great.
After doing such a heightened state or a big character or tapping into such a big emotion, how do you rebalance?
I mean, there's you go in with a very pretty disconnected mindset to a point. Like you're as character as you can be. That being said, most organizations that have heightened scenarios will kind of give you an off time, so you have something really intense, then you can kind of just go sit in a corner for a little bit with like a tea and just be for a bit before you do it again or something like that. It is a lot, and there are days where like I lose my voice. There are days where I come home and I'm like, I'm just gonna go to bed at 10 because I'm done for the day. I'm emotionally fried. But you get, honestly, kind of like anything, you get used to it. It's part of the criteria. It's part of the job. Often it's therapeutic for yourself. You're like, well, I just screamed for 15 minutes straight and I feel better. So everyone's going to have kind of their own way, but usually you get like a little debrief time to kind of decompress. And then sometimes it does come home with you. Sometimes you just know people really do go through these things and it's hard and you take it home with you. But it is good to also know that you're trying to make those steps easier for other people.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. So I want to like ask more about just like the general sort of philosophy of how to use this work. But before I forget, I'm also curious, like, how common is it? Like, do you have a sense of like, are like all hospitals doing this, and how do people even look for it, or if this sounds like, wow, what a cool, rewarding thing to be able to do, how would you even go looking for an opportunity?
Yeah, so I think it's probably more common than people realize, but it's definitely not universal at this point. There are hospitals that do it. They have their own division. Our local hospitals have a simulation and training department. Like that, the department is to take care of that concept. And sometimes you'll find it at universities instead of the hospitals.
Oh, yeah.
So they're there. I know even like our local universities will do them. Oftentimes you'll find them kind of either as simulation experts, standardized patients, role players. Those are kind of the words that you would look for. But again, everyone kind of does it to a different extent. I think it's becoming more and more common. In the past, a lot of hospitals would have other people going through the courses play the patient. So it's like I'm, working through to become a nurse at this hospital. Other people who are working through would get the paper and portray it. But what they find with that is it's not the same commitment. They're not improvisers. They just kind of read off the script. You have someone else who's in the course who understands the end goal. So they just kind of feed it to you to get to that end goal. So we're still kind of in that moment where that still kind of happens, but people are realizing not as effective as kind of having external people that they don't know come in and really play it.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be finding more and more of it as time goes on. But the most common place you're going to find it is definitely kind of hospitals and universities. But I think it's going to keep growing.
Okay, yeah. Universities is a great thing to point out, because I bet you, that's your education zone, right? So it's like, it's great for a hospital to have its own training branch. But yeah, if you're looking for where all the education is happening, I think a college or university is a great place to look.
All the education.
That's where all the education happens.
Hey, kids, where all the education happening.
One
all learning
building,
goes down.
It's all there. Yeah.
So, let me just ask more, pick your brain about the process of this kind of stuff. So I'm guessing that the people in training, do they always know what they're getting into, or is there like, is there ever like, we're going to say this, they know they're training, but we're going to throw in something unexpected? And mainly what I'm asking is like, how do you kind of get around or reduce the side effect of knowing that you're in a simulation?
Yeah, the suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
Yeah, they always know. They know that it's a performer and they know it's a situation. But they also know that their educators, teachers, staff that keep, count of them are watching. And so they have to try and do a good job. And I've been fortunate. I've not had a lot of people who come in and are kind of like,
Yeah.
Whatever, you're fine, go home. I haven't had that. I'm sure they exist once in a while. Like there's no doubt in my mind that I'm sure once in a while someone's having a bad day, has a bad attitude, and is just not about it.
Right.
But more often than not, they want to succeed in, either in the eyes of their superiors, in a grade, in whatever. So they try. They may fail, but they try. I've had people who have 120% missed the point of the simulation, and you can't get them back. Where I've been in those ones where, you get these little like robot babies to play your babies. And so there's like a little robot baby and something's happening and it's turning blue, and like the robot's literally turning blue.
What?
And you're sitting there and you're like being this parent who's, worked up, and they'll be like, I left you alone in this room and that baby wasn't blue. And now that baby's blue. What did you do? And you're like, that's not the point of the simulation. The point is to help the blue baby. And you just cannot get them
Help
to
the
not
blue
think that
baby.
you just murdered this baby. And you're like, no,
You had one job. It's to take care of that baby, and now it's blue.
right. And I'm like, no, I didn't just murder this baby. The whole point is for you to come in and fix the baby.
Don't tell me what my point is. I know a blue baby when I see one, and ma'am, you're holding a blue baby.
So you
I
have
think we found the name of this episode.
It happens, and the great thing is, people are watching, so you might get a little over the last week. They're like, hey, the mother did not suffocate the baby, just fix the baby. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they're like trying to fix the baby. So sometimes
I like to work backwards. I want to know why first and then fix the baby.
So sometimes they need guidance, but I think normally they have pretty good intention.
Yeah.
They often, I think, will get more nervous than anything. And they may try to like pause or step out of the situation. In a lot of our simulations, we basically create an area in the room that is considered out of the room because we don't want them to actually leave into the hospital. So they can do, their charting or call somebody. And as the performer, you're not supposed to see them or hear them because they're technically out of the room. They're kind of by the door in a marked off area. And sometimes they just stay there. Like they're really nervous and they just don't come back. And you can hear them for like 20 minutes being like, well, I don't know what to do. And I don't know. And they're calling people and they just, they've been in the simulation talking to me for a whole minute and spent 19 minutes hiding. So you're more likely to get kind of nerves than I refuse to participate. But honestly, I'm sure it happens. It happens kind of in anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess I was thinking about people more like sort of knowing what you're supposed to do and just kind of like phoning it in and not necessarily like throwing up their hands and being like this is BS, but more just kind of like hitting the things on the checklist, like kind of hacking the game of it, But I suppose nerves is actually probably a more probably a more common side effect, I would think, is that like maybe people who would perform better if it were a real scenario are just like I've got all my colleagues and superiors watching me, and now this is really putting me in my head or whatever. But again, for better or worse, even if it's not the same type of stress or pressure, like creating that pressure to perform is still gonna have its benefits to go through that simulation, even if it's not for the same reason that you would be nervous in a different situation.
Yeah, and usually they're not just in one. Usually it's not like you've done one simulation and you're done. Usually there's a simulation or two and then kind of a really structured debrief in any of these, which I think is also kind of key for their learning, is they go through what they did well, what they need to improve upon, and those are the moments that the people can be like, you kind of feel like you're phoning it in. Like you did not even remotely try to make a connection. You simply checked that their lines were done, went, I'll call in some tests and left. And usually at that moment, if the participant is phoning it in, they're like, oh no, they caught me. I better do better the next time. And then there are more simulations down the road that they get to kind of improve upon that approach. But, usually people are relatively new to the position when they do simulations. And they honestly, they're like, I need to solve this and I may not know how. And they really do kind of try. It's a small percentage of people who I would say phone it in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kurt is wondering about this blue baby, and I got to be honest.
Well, to put context to it, I believe Kurt is an EMS worker, so this is probably general curiosity and not just a joke. Have you learned how to? Have you learned how to fix a blue baby by just being in the simulation so much?
Yes.
There you go.
No, these are the questions that I like. Yeah. So, and it's also just as a thing. It's like it is a little tiny robot, but it's like a little squishy, like a baby. Like they add a little.
Oh yeah, like the one I used for American Sniper.
I have no idea what that means.
Okay. I'll explain the reference. Well, okay, I think I gotta do it now. In the movie American Sniper, they used a fake baby in one of his scenes where it's supposed to be him as a touching father, but it's a really fake looking baby. And that was like the big critique of that movie was look at this Oscar-winning actor play to this baby. He does an amazing job. I can't think of the actor's name. I think probably Kurt knows, but I do not.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's.
Sorry, I derailed that. I'm sorry.
It's fine. No, I really am curious.
I'll send you the scene later. It's pretty awesome. I think it's good.
I have not had that much exposure to, these kind of robotic, simulated humanoids until I started this, but you also get full-blown patients. If you're playing a family member and you want them to actually stick a needle in, do something weird, they're clearly not going to do that to us as, performers. So you get these people and someone's sitting in the back room with a microphone and they're talking and they can change their blood pressure and their heart rate. So it's actually, and their chest is going up and down and they can give compressions. They're amazing. And then sometimes in between takes, you sit in a dark room with just like 15 to 20 of these things lying on shelves. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Horror movie scenario.
And sometimes
little robotic death rattle. No thank you.
You're like reading your book and then you're like, this is terrifying.
Bradley Cooper was the actor.
Bradley Cooper.
That we all needed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kurt.
Robot baby.
Well, so just to take this is
to go back. Yeah.
Well,
go
because
back to Robot Baby.
The blue baby thing was very distracting to me. It was in my head, and I'm thinking about.
Honestly, the moment you read that, your whole demeanor changed.
No, not Kurt's thing.
Oh.
I couldn't stop thinking about the person coming in and being like, "Why is this baby blue? What did you do?" And I guess to sort of put that to a more useful application in this conversation, like I do think that it's difficult to like sometimes keep yourself in this scenario. And again, we just talked about how like, some people disengage in different ways or get nervous, but like, just out of curiosity, have you ever found yourself in a place where like this is absurd or like, trying to hold it together?
There are definite times where they are so far off or they're just like really vibing on something different or they're confused and making jokes about it that you are like, don't laugh, stay in character. Oh man, keep it together. There are 100% times, and sometimes you feel horrible about it because you're playing a patient like in a really bad kind of situation, but you watch them just trying to like process, but then make a really bad joke about it because they're nervous, so they're making jokes, and you really want to sympathize and laugh with them. And there are definite times where you're like kind of clenching down on your teeth to try to not smile because you really don't want to. We all have tricks like that. 100%. There are times where, if you play like a stroke patient, your left arm isn't supposed to move, but how many times have we been like, hey, and then you're like, oh no.
I'm cured.
I'm not better. Yeah.
You're so good.
So, we all have tricks to like, hook our thumb under our legs. So we hope that we don't pick up our arm or, again, the beauty of them knowing that we're performers is they will often give a little in that same situation as a stroke patient. They will take a really dull, kind of like you're like an end of a paper clip or, something kind of slightly sharp and pokey, but not bad to like, touch your finger or toe and be like, do you feel that? And even though we do, we're supposed to say no. But I distinctly remember somebody once, I think she was nervous, her hands were shaking really bad. She poked me really hard, like enough that I like flinched and jumped a little bit. And this poor woman looks up and she was like, you didn't feel that, right? And I was like, no. She was like, I didn't think so. And she just like went back because she knew she had made me jump, but she wasn't supposed to. So they're pretty good at forgiving little.
Are you okay? Okay.
Freeze.
Yeah. They're great like that. But yeah, there have been times, oh my gosh, where I have tried so hard not to laugh. you do kind of like the holding your cheek in kind of thing, and you're like, don't laugh.
Yeah.
I've never done the holding the cheek thing and not to laugh. I gotta try that because I am a light touch. I am so.
Yeah. Does it help in has it helped you feel your general acting commitment on stage for improvising, and what kind of like positive reinforcement or side effects does it have for your stage play?
Yeah, it's a whole different world. I mean, it's still improv because there is no script and you are going into a completely unsure person and situation, but it really does have you double down on commitment to your character. Whatever that may be, you are going to double down and commit. It also really, really helps you learn to say the same thing in multiple ways. If they're missing it, you're trying to get them on a path, re-saying something in different ways, which does
like playing party quirks. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very similar. And so that helps on stage, if you're really trying to get something across to your partner, or you're playing a game where you're just saying the same thing, whatever it is, you really learn the nuances of saying the same thing in different ways. But also the nuances of body language like nothing before. Because, you often don't know what's going on, but you've learned body language and you learn to read these participants instantly. I can someone can come in the door and I can go, they are nervous, they are cranky, they're excited, this person's going to be real cocky. Like, you can kind of gauge them how they walk in and introduce themselves, so you get really solid kind of intuition on body language of what's going on. And I think all of that helps on the stage.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure that's great for, tons of reasons, just being able to be more empathetic in conversation and sensitive to people's body language around you. But then on stage, I imagine that you get a lot more cues and a lot more, you can use a lot more from what your scene partner is doing, intentional or not. I'm sure choices come much more easily if you're more attuned to that kind of body language.
Plus, your range in characters must be phenomenal. Like playing an older character, or like Shannon Stott was talking about. Like, have you spent time with a kid? When adults play kids who haven't spent any time with kids, it can be bad.
Yeah,
they're all the same. Every child in an
every child is the same. You don't become special until you're 18.
Precocious know-it-alls. Yep.
Yeah, from age 1 to 17, you all have the same vocal quality, and then 18 is a whole new game.
Yeah.
Yeah. In general, I don't know the age of children and what that correlates to. Like if I am introduced to a child, I have no concept if they are like 3 or 10. So I know that impacts how I improvise.
Yeah, it is, and because it does change. I'm sure it changes so much, but I don't know exactly how. I don't have kids, but if you're like, okay, in this scene you're going to be 5, and the next scene you're going to be 8, I'm like, same thing to me.
Yeah. I'm going to be slightly taller.
Yeah.
At 5, I crawl, right, and then I'm
8.
When do you start talking? Because I don't remember.
Yeah, 8 is potty training. I'm pretty sure.
Oh my god.
Okay, I'm learning a lot here.
Yeah, potty train to like the 4th or 5th grade.
As long as they don't turn blue, we're great. That's all I know. So.
Yeah. Are there any other? So you got the military and the hospital. Are there any other sorts of occupational role play experiences you've had that you want to unpack?
Yeah, so those have honestly been my kind of 2 sectors of the world. I have done kind of hospital work for maybe about 6 years now, which is interesting because in the last year we've now ventured into telehealth. So now we do telehealth simulations.
Oh, yeah.
To try to train people in that. But that's kind of been my main focus because that was my thesis and what I spent a lot of time researching. Mm-hmm. And I mean, researching everything from, Viola Spolin's work to modern medical advancements, the whole scope. That's really been my focus. But I do know that there are people out there who do, corporations customer service, how to deal with an angry customer. They will do things in education, like you're a teacher and a child is bullying another child, how do you handle that? Those all exist.
Yeah.
I just personally have kind of focused in on a section because I find a lot of personal benefit, but also I feel like I'm contributing, and I find it fascinating, the whole experience. And I've learned a lot of medical words that I probably don't 100% know what they mean, but enough that
Yeah, you can fake it.
You could.
Not like the rest of us do.
If we were on a boat and it was sinking and one person had to be thrown over, I could lie that I'm the doctor and I can't be sacrificed.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I also just have like a stockpile of suture temporary tattoos, which really help for like Halloween and stuff. So
fun first date stuff, you know?
Bonus. Yeah. Well, that's so awesome. Yeah, I'm really glad we got to talk to you about your experience with this, and I think that it is, like you said, it's just such a really valuable, rewarding way to apply improv skills, and it reminds me of my girlfriend Julia was doing phone banking during the election, and they were looking for improvisers too, for people who can like really connect with the people they're talking to and have good active listening skills, and be able to just really reach people on a human level, and still have, you know, some kind of like script that they use, but not in a robotic way, you know? So it's like,
it's the human part. The improvisers are the human part. They're not the book. They're not the learn this phrase and learn how to intubate somebody. They're the human part. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love finding out, and finding out about this kind of stuff, and giving people hopefully ideas of like, oh, well, maybe that's something that I would want to do or look into, because I think it's a great application for this stuff. And thank you so much for sharing your experience with it.
I'm so happy to. Thanks for having me on and chatting.
Yeah,
next time I'll take a picture of the blue baby and share it. So that
please. Blue baby selfie. Yeah.
I'll take a blue baby selfie.
Yes.
Boy.
Well,
But anyways,
did we just discover the name of our improv troupe?
Blue baby selfie. Yes.
Coming to the stage.
Great.
We're gonna do an Armando.
And we're gonna try. Yeah, we're gonna tell stories until the baby turns blue.
Yep.
And then we do our first scene. Yeah.
First scene.
Yeah, this has been awesome, Mel. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for all the work that you do for the Improv Network as well. And I hope that everybody checks out the improvnetwork.org. Obviously, you're either watching this through the Improv Network Facebook page or the Improv FAQ YouTube channel. And you can also find more of these conversations and videos and other fantastic resources on the website, theimprovnetwork.org. Thanks again, Mel.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. Everybody watch. They do such fun stuff every week.
And
I like this. Yeah.
Well, and you know what? I almost skipped this just because we're on the Improv Network here, which is one of your main bags. But is there anything else, Mel, that you want to plug that's coming up, virtual shows or anything like that?
Honestly, I'm taking a little bit of a break. I work for the Orlando Fringe Festival, which is coming up. So kind of between now and mid-June, when the festival wraps, I'm kind of in producer mode. Okay. So, but hope everyone's having a wonderful time. I know things are starting to open up. Some are still virtual, but wherever you're all doing your shows, let us know about them. I want to see them. So,
Is the Fringe Festival going to be virtual, or is it live? How are you guys doing?
The first 2 weeks are going to be in person. And then the second 2 weeks, which is June 4th to June 18th, it will be online. So anybody anywhere can kind of buy tickets to virtual shows at the virtual festival.
Oh, that's awesome.
Great. That's awesome. So we'll share links for that when it's available for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Kurt, thanks for joining. Miss you. Hope you're doing well. And hope you learned a lot about Blue Baby. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll catch you next time on the Improv Network podcast. Bye.
Bye.